Welcome back to Doing Sex Differently. We are your hosts, Lauren.
Oh, Trevor.
And Trevor. And we're so glad you're back for another episode with us. This is all about how to do sex differently so that you can actually have long-term satisfaction of sex in your relationship until you're 80, 90, 100 years old. But really what this episode today is about is that we are going to expand into why doing sex differently will bring you more satisfaction in your sex life, but also into connection with yourself as well. And that's really where it starts, is that this is about a connection, a deeper connection, a knowing within yourself of how powerful you are as an individual, whether you are the man or the woman listening to this, or if you're in a same-sex partnership as well, knowing your role as an individual and how powerful you are and how that creates more power when you are with another.
Yeah, I'd say in the previous episode, it was a great overview of what we're doing now and what the journey that we decided to step into. And we've already received a lot of feedback from some friends and just wow, it's quite inspiring taking this alternative path. And I feel like today we just want to, go deeper on why even maybe think about choosing this alternative path. Why maybe doing sex differently is maybe the way to go, so and just speak from our own experience, because we're learning as we go about this, and we just want to share what we're learning. That's it.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about, being more powerful and our reasons behind choosing to do sex differently, power really comes down to energy, and energy gets built with your own self-awareness. So connection to yourself is going to be the first and foremost practice. Whether it was, Trevor and I having our own experiences of, not feeling as connected as we could be in sex. Most of that came from my end because I was like, I know I want to do sex differently. I want to slow down. I want to do things differently. Doing things differently, do sex differently, of course. And men often are the ones feeling a lot of pleasure already in sex, because the way that we see sex done in media and in porn and the way that it gets normalized is a very fast-paced, friction-based sex that works for the way that the male body and male pleasure works. But the way the female body works is the exact opposite. And women, in order to feel more satisfaction in sex, need to go slower. We need more time. It literally takes more time for our body to warm up. So a big reason behind doing sex differently is to honor the different pace that both the male body has and the female body has, and actually taking time to properly warm up so that you can meet each other in pleasurable connection that works for both of you, and honoring the differences in each person. And this is what happens is when you get into a new relationship, there's a lot of new energy, there's a lot of excitement, and sex probably feels really good. But then for a woman, it gets, just for lack of a better word, it gets old. It gets boring after a while because it becomes so predictable. Because it's we have our favorite positions, we do these things, bing, bang, boom, and in 30 minutes and you're done. And that's being generous. 30 minutes is generous for a lot of people, I would say. Some people are only having sex for 10, 15 minutes. So in order to build a longer sexual connection, you have to honor each other's bodies and really build into the pleasure. And what that takes for women and for men to understand about women is that we have a much slower pace, and that, I don't really love the term foreplay, but it's intimacy. It is, it's because foreplay can be all the time. A woman can really see anything as foreplay, as desirable, from texting and communication, leading up to that evening, or just how she's being, treated by her man, and all of those things she can allow that to fill her up with excitement. And, but I feel like a lot of women are actually dreading and trying to avoid sex once you get into a relationship and it feels so routine that what is missing is this slowness and meeting the present moment and meeting each other with your energy and how your body is meant to operate within sex. In order for sex to be something that is wanted by both parties, because women are going to be the ones who are likely going to say, you know, this is unsatisfactory before a man will. In order to have long-term sex, you have to do it differently. If you want to have sex, you know, a great sex well into, you know, your 50s, 60s and beyond, and have, you know, a very satisfactory sexual relationship, a woman not only has to know her body and how her pleasure works, but a man too also needs to understand how a woman's body works. And this is where it comes, you know, both men and women work together to relearn all of what has been lost, what was never, you know, taught in sexual education, and, you know, what we don't see in movies and all of the things. Everything that we see is very quick, fast-paced, you know, friction-based sex. And sex can be really pleasurable when it's slow and takes its time to build sensation, and sitting in that sensation, being with that, expanding that, is a new muscle that needs to grow within women. And for men to also be patient, because actually men, you can confirm or deny this, get a lot of pleasure from seeing a woman in her pleasure.
Yeah.
And so while men are very turned on by, you know, looking at a woman, just the curves of a woman, not that she needs to like be any type of beauty standard, but men are turned on and receive pleasure from looking at a woman's curves, and it's just her femininity and the way that she is different than him and the sounds that she makes, because, you know, when she's making a sound, that's her receiving, or him being received by her. And women, though, are actually turned on by their own pleasure and sensation. And that, you know, that's why certain types of pics don't work for us. Like, we're not looking at a man getting turned on. We are turned on by our own pleasure. And so that's also something that's just really different between men and women, beautifully designed in different ways. And acknowledging the differences is really what is going to, and learning the differences and learning what you like and what you don't like together is how you can co-create and build long-term satisfaction.
Yeah, for me, in terms of the idea of long-term satisfaction, it does mean, hey, if we want to have sex, you know, continuing, you know, 5-10 years down the road, that means we need to be developing, working on, communicating, and learning about each other's bodies in the now to keep it spicy moving forward, you know. And if we just continue to repeat the same thing and there's no actual growth, there's no actual, you know, development, what longs us to keep showing up for each other in this place of intimacy when it's exactly that? So in my own perspective, in my own, you know, way of looking, I'm like, okay, that means I do need to look at sex a little differently than what I've known, especially if my partner is sharing, you know, what she's feeling and what maybe she would like a bit more of. And then also now we get more learning and education around this. It's like, okay, this is starting to make a bit more sense, and we can start studying and taking a new approach to be more connective, to be more intimate, to be more receptive, to be able to receive her. And and it's not just about me, it's about us. And yeah, it's true, traditionally as the man, you know, we like, you know, what we've seen on movies and stuff like that, and it may be not as nice for the woman, you know, just pounding the living crap out of her. If you want to actually be making love, that may not be the case, so we got to shift gears a bit.
Yeah. And like what you just said there, making love. So at an energetic core, we are love as human beings, but what we have learned of how to, do sex, what we've seen in media and porn and things like that, it's actually our someone that we follow calls it, it's actually like it's a violent touch versus loving and caring and nurturing. And that's why you actually need less friction, less aggressiveness, and you can actually feel more once you resensitize to slower, sensual, light touch. You can expand the pleasure with just very loving touch, and it becomes very energetic. So you don't need as much pressure, force, friction, anything like that, because the energy is of love, and you can relax in that. And the more you relax in that and you stop trying to feel, but you just relax and allow yourself to receive the sensation, that gets to be really pleasurable. And so this is why, doing sex differently is creating love from the inside out, because it's coming back to our energetic core. And we talked a little bit about this in the first episode, but when it was my desire, to actually do sex differently, to try things differently, to come back to, okay, how can we slow down, do more loving touch and connection? While I would say our mindset was in the right place, from the get-go about, being conscious and loving towards one another, but really then actually changing our actions, it can be very confronting to your partner. There can be a lot of resistance around like, what am I doing wrong? And It's not about doing it wrong. It's just offering yourself, oh, what if I were to do this differently? Because you're not out here, doing anything wrong. This is what we've learned. This is what we've seen. This is what we've normalized in society. And so it's just offering yourself and your partner in your, if you're in a partnership or just even if you're single right now, offering a way to try it a little differently and see what happens. Because if you've never tried it a different way, how do you really know? So a lot of times, we think that we need what we've always done, that's the only way that works, but it only works that way because we've just practiced it that way. So when we start practicing a new way of being, we can resensitize to a more subtle, energetic level of pleasure, level of love, that energetic love that we are at our core. Yeah, I've been, against vibrators and any toy that is going to take away your own sensation. And I actually grew to really just liking my fingers touching my body, inside of my yoni and all of that, because that's like, it's just true touching your humanity, not being afraid of the flesh of my body, of my yoni. And yes, I'll use crystal wands and things like that from time to time. And my sexual awakening, started with, using vibrators and things. And that, was my first step of like, okay, now I'm knowing myself on a different level, but still it was a disconnect. And then when I moved to Mexico, I chose not to bring any sort of vibrator with me. And I was like, I'm only bringing my glass or crystal wands. And those became then my tools. And then after that, I was like, I use those less and less now, because also I'm just using my fingers to actually touch my own body, which is something we've been so conditioned to think is wrong or bad or dirty or whatever, when really this is my body, my one life that I have in this body. Like, I'm going to touch it the way that I want to touch it. I'm going to explore it and figure it out and resensitize it, not be afraid of my body. Because when we're resensitizing, we are literally making neural connections from our brain to our body to where we might not, where something that, is not well practiced. If we're not touching ourselves regularly, exploring our bodies, and even for men as well, if you're always touching yourself one way, that is the way that you've normalized. And so when you start to slow down, you can attune yourself to the more subtle sensations, and you make those neural connections from your brain to, the flesh of your genitals, and you build sensation from there.
There's a lot of danger actually in the rapid orgasm, whether it's a woman or a man, to simply get off as quick as possible to reach that peak and like quote unquote finish, or for the woman being able to do that over and over and over again and pushing your body. And what is that training us is that's how we get off. So then when we're in deep intimacy, when the man's deep inside her, we're not feeling as much. It's not as pleasurable, because what you knew how to orgasm was in this certain way, which isn't necessarily the way that we're talking about of, unlocking higher realms, higher connectivity, higher, rejuvenation, versus a peak and then, peak, a boom. And as the man, when we are subjected to the stigma of like getting off or jerking off and all these type of things, and we spread our seed, solo in the bedroom, it also affects us out in the real world. It affects us in terms of our energy, our libido, all these type of things. So we want to work towards removing some of that, which is taking this slower approach, resensitizing, different pleasure practices and so forth. And babe, like, I think where we can go from here is I want to go back to like the why from our own perspective, from why we as the individual started to think this way. And I want to hear from your side where that kind of rooted from, where it started to, hey, why towards the decision of like, let's take this approach.
When I was 30 years old and got out of a relationship and just felt like sex had always been something that was routine, not as satisfactory as I thought it could be, not, getting off with partners, but being able to get myself off in a very routine way that, I knew how to do, but could not achieve from intercourse. Even at 25 years old, my boyfriend at the time literally broke up with me because, this is after 2 years and after a lot of toxic interactions. But then he was like, you know what, like sex is never going to be good enough for you. And like, he just didn't want to deal with me, not being able to get off. And I was like, I thought I was broken and whatever. Then I got into a relationship that was like very healthy, whatever. But again, nothing was quite satisfactory because I didn't know how to voice my own desires. So I went on my own journey because I wanted to know this part of myself. And I wanted it to stop holding me back from the true pleasure that I knew that other people were experiencing. And I was like, why am I not experiencing that? And really, when I think back to it, back in, 6th or 7th grade when we had sex ed, and it was like, oh, you can, this is how, you need to use protection. And like, if you have sex, you're going to get pregnant. And then I literally equated, like, if I get pregnant, my life is over, like I'm going to die. And so then I literally was equating like sex and pleasure with die. And so like my life is over. So I shut down that part of myself and I had to come back to myself and I had to figure out, I just had this like my early 30s were just this coming back to myself of like, if I achieve nothing else in life as far as like relationship, family, success, or anything, I was like, before I get out of this world, I was like, I better know my body. And so I just got curious and, I was joining memberships where using yoni eggs was like a thing to like resensitize, a practice to resensitize my yoni. And it brought me into just deeper awareness of like my body. And I started to learn about female pleasure and how it's not just all about the clit. There's also like internal spots. And then I started to learn about the cervix. And all of a sudden I found out that like the pinnacle orgasm is cervical orgasm. Now, that may or may not be true. Maybe in my perspective, that's what I think is like cervical orgasm is like the pinnacle of orgasms. But, you know, there's so many different types of orgasms that you can have, that our body is wired for pleasure. But I at least came from a very survival mode, you know, whether it's just because of like the family environment I grew up in, and then the societal things that I took on as far as like, this is how I need to operate in order to survive. I wanted to get back to what is my true power? What am I truly capable of? If other women are telling me that they're experiencing these things, how do I practice and attune myself to also experience similar things? And so I just wanted to know the true power of my nature. And it has been a journey, but the path continually evolves and is revealed, and more is like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, that makes sense. And like, yeah, putting all of the pieces together, it's a journey that I was meant to go on to find out more about myself and what I'm passionate about. And I'm really passionate about, you know, energetic potential, and actually really understanding now that our energy gets tied up in so much shame and guilt and fear. And that's where we're the most controllable. And that's what the powers that be in society want us. They want us to be controllable. And now I'm seeing that we have been cut off from so much pleasure in our day-to-day life. And then even, you know, in sexual interactions with men, it has ruined the relationship between man and woman. And I want to repair that. And I want to be powerful on my own and with a partner, and create this like orgasmic potential that I know that is available. So I just became fascinated with energy and what our bodies can do, what's available to our bodies, what we can experience. And that's, a deep part of my why, and kind of uncovering all of what has been suppressed and repressed and shut down. And being able to turn around and be like, joke's on you. I'm the most powerful being that I know, and I can create these incredible experiences, and we are going to thrive, and we're no longer holding ourselves back, and all of that. So here I am 10 years later, after being broken up with for not being able to orgasm. Joke's on you. You sent me down the right path to come back to my own power. Everything happens for you. What about you? I know that I initially probably started your journey, but why did you choose the journey? I know we had talks about, I was like, you don't have to do this. Like, I know it was confronting and there was a lot of resistance going into it, but ultimately you had to choose this for yourself. And so what was that like for you to come to your own conclusion of why you wanted to continue?
Yeah, from my side, you know, the ultimate goal in life is human potential, right? And there's different areas to work on in terms of achieving that. You know, I believe I want to become a very optimized human being. You know, that's with the health, that's with the fitness, that's with the diet, that's with your mind, that's with your emotions, etc. And, you know, the further side of that is the sexuality type subject. And for me, it's a lot of it's just the openness to new ideas, openness to working on something via, I guess, a different approach, but ultimately where I see that there's mutual benefit for both of us, but also benefit for myself, where, wow, like me working towards this, I can achieve multiple orgasm, I can achieve non-ejaculatory orgasm, I can achieve, you know, be able to use my sexual energy for other purposes, and, you know, be able to be in a loving, lasting relationship that also has many other benefits to it. You know, having a woman in my life, is just transcending alone. So having the opportunity to be able to do that with someone that you deeply care about, that you love, that you see future, it's like, that's the best blessing. That's God's gift. And it would be silly for me to not, delve a bit deeper, to not at least give it a shot and see what the possibility could be for. So for me, it's more of a curiosity, but the curiosity of the future ability. And that's allows it. Plus, it's also fun. It's also, it's fun too.
Mm-hmm. And I think with that too, what you're saying, like well, not only are you future-proofing your sex life, for sure, but something I didn't mention that's a deep part of my why as well is it's not only work for me, it's also work for my future children. It's me knowing myself. When I know myself, what's good for me is going to be good for my future children. And I want my children to see, that they have a mother who is powerful and self-led and, just knows herself, so that I can teach my children that how to know themselves, and that I can have a partner as well who is, knows himself as a man and can also be a strong figure. So it's like we're doing this for ourselves, right now, but then as we plan to have children into the future, we are setting them up to thrive, not have to go through this survival conditioning, less and less of it, so that, this is what the evolution of human consciousness is we are setting up the future generation to be more emotionally intelligent, to be connected to their bodies, to, have their masculine and feminine energy integrated so that they can know themselves as a whole being, and they can create from this place of overflow and self-connection, and not have to go through all the hoops of limitation and doubt and fear and surviving struggle. So we are, again, like kind of, future proofing our, the future generations to know themselves on a deeper level.
We talk about it a lot in terms of like talking about, hey, our future children and the values that we want to share as parents, as a couple. And when we talk about this, it's like this work is the gateway to be able to give what we want to give to that generation. Also purpose of creating podcasts, creating content, it's like we want to be able to be a good influence to lead others, to share, to inspire. And with doing so, if we can raise the consciousness level of the universe of a few people, right, that's continually doing good in this world. And we get to be the people that take charge of that we decided, hey, you know what, we're making this a part of our mission. We have other goals, we're doing business, we're doing things, we're doing life, but also it's like, okay, we need to also have little commitments for ourselves to continue to learn, to continue to show up for us, to continue, practice our doing sex differently.
Yeah. It's embodying the possibility. It's showing others what's possible, whether it is, your close friends, your family, your future children. It's, choosing what feels right for you and showing others the possibility. And so, should this be something that you choose to take on with your current partner or future partner, it's like you then get to also lead by example, be the example for, your social network and your future children, and doing so from a place of, loving yourself. And on that note too, it's like, I wasn't shown like a loving relationship between my parents growing up. They were very much in survival mode, very much, together for, building the nuclear family and, having dual income and things like that. And just, they somewhere along the line, fell out of love. And I truly believe it was because they had limited connection to themselves. And when you see that parents are not choosing themselves first and foremost, it's a really big disservice to children. And I want my family, or, you know, my family that I'm going to create, to have an example of a loving partnership of this is what love is like. This is what, this is how you create love. This is how you create loving interactions. This is how you hold space for each other's emotions and things like that. And that's what we are at the forefront of, and not hiding from those emotions anymore. Like we talked about in the last episode, the old way of sex is emotional sex, is, you know, having sex because you're trying to feel something that you haven't felt on your own. Now we are getting to energetic sex, which is truly this basis of like pleasure and love, because the emotions, we're not running from the emotions anymore. We are actively feeling them, releasing them, breathing through them, allowing them to come up, not suppressing them. And therefore, when we clear those emotions, underneath them is more pleasure, is more love, is more sensation from doing less. So we don't need the friction, because you can get to that core energy.
Yeah, growing up, I never heard anything, you know, from my parents, you know, in terms of how is their sex life. You know, that's not something that is shared upon households, being like, I don't know, it's behind closed doors, you know.
Yeah. We don't talk about it. It's taboo. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe there's one time where you just like hear something, you know, but like that's it. But you never ever it's talked about. And then what's talked about, it's the sex ed that you saw in grade 7, right? Like, okay, you know, you're getting to that age, let's talk about it. But there's never ever talking about, you know, the connective side, the love side, the how it can be used as a resource and so forth. And yeah, I believe in our household that, you know, it can be totally okay to talk to our children about our sex. You know, it's like, why not? So,
yeah.
Babe, question for you. What, like, why did you choose me to explore this topic? You know, we're dating for like 3 months at the time, and you're like, hey, let's take another step. And like, why did you choose that in that moment?
Well, I knew that I wanted to have a sacred sexual relationship, you know, long-term relationship. And I knew that, you know, I knew from my side that I was working towards, you know, sensitizing my cervix. I mean, this journey for me started, you know, a while ago, but along the way, there have been like little up levels of, you know, when I took a year off of dating completely, there was a man that I interacted with, and he wanted to have sex. And I said, no. And he said, why? Don't you trust me? And I said, no, I don't trust that you can hold space for my feelings. And like, I was like, and he goes, well, why do you think that? What do you mean? And I said, what would you think if I cried during sex? And he said, oh, I would have thought that that's like kind of weird. And like, and I was like, exactly. And I knew that I wanted sex to be a safe space for emotions to come up. I just wanted all of me to be accepted, because I was already going through my sexual awakening, and I was already doing what we call de-armoring. With your yoni is where you resensitize it, and emotions come up because we feel this shame or this sadness or this because of the disconnection that we've had, that I already knew that all of these emotions were coming up, that I was like, well, if I'm with a man, and I haven't been with a man in quite some time because I've been taking this, you know, sabbatical from men, that I was like, I don't want to be with someone who can't hold space for me. So it was like, there was that. And then once I moved to Mexico, I was talking to a man, and I was like, I want this type of, you know, partnership, and I want to go to tantra retreats, and I want to explore sexuality. And he was just a hard no to that. He just wasn't interested in that. Wasn't something he wanted to put his time or attention towards. And I was like, okay, then you're not for me. And so it's just been this evolution of me becoming more and more confident for what I wanted. The man before you, you know, we would kind of talk about it. We were kind of exploring some things, but he didn't really get it. We only got so far. And then with you, it was just like, I was just that much more confident early on to be like, hey, this is what I want. And you were open to it. But I had no attachment to whether you were going to say like yes or no. I just knew that this was what I wanted. It's been something I've been wanting for a long time. It's not like something I just came up with one day. I knew I was wanting this for a long time. And I feel like we had talked about it maybe a little bit like lightly, but we uncovered a lot together. I mean, even when I first asked you about like, hey, I want to do sex differently, you know, I maybe didn't even understand the extent of which I was asking for you, because I sort of thought maybe still that I was the problem and that we're doing this for me, until I started to realize that, oh, when I ask a man to slow down, actually what comes up is a lot of like ego driven fear comes up for the man that needs to be cleared. Like, oh, he's not good enough. Or, you know, because men are so tied to performance and achievement and all of these things that it almost feels like a woman is telling him, this isn't good enough. You're not good at this. When really she's just asking for, hey, can we do it in a way that also feels good for me? And it's a learning curve. It requires some learning. And so that's why I've known I've wanted this for a while. And you happen to be the divine timing, right person to really dive deep into this, to the one who wanted to commit and, you know, uncover your potential.
When we first met, it was all like little synchronicities and alignments that like kept showing up over time, and here we are, and still at it. So we're gonna see what else unfolds and where our journey takes us. But
and one crazy thing I'll add on too is that I was working with a coach right when I moved to Mexico. So this was maybe like early 2023, and I had said, I didn't understand. I was like, I know that I have like, you know, desires because I can turn them into like, you know, purpose and serve other people, you know, through my business. And I was like, I just have this desire for like to talk about cervical orgasm, but I was like, but I haven't achieved that yet, and blah, blah, blah. And this coach goes, that's okay. She's like, this desire is part of your path. And she goes, what if you're meant to serve others with a man in the future? And I was like, what? She like opened up this possibility for me that I could serve this purpose, you know, of awakening, you know, my cervix and all of this with a partner. And it was like she planted the seed. And
now we have Lauren and Trev Enterprises.
Yeah, I just continued to water the seed and be about it. And here we are. Like you said, like the synchronicities. It's like I knew that it would come to me. I knew that it was possible. And that's why I also confidently was like, you can either be in this or out of this, because if it's not you, it's going to be someone else. And there was no pressure for you to stay and to want this for yourself. But what I've noticed, I will say, is that a majority of the time, women are going to be the one asking men to do this work. We have heard of men who are asking their woman to do it as well. But the majority of the time, what I see right now, because women are the ones jumping on self-development more so than men, is that women are doing this work for themselves and will invite men into it. So a lot of times you'll hear this said in like a little more like fluffier way of like, women are initiating men into this work, which means they're just inviting men into this work. So a lot of times that will be the case because women are the ones who can feel the disconnection with their body, and they'll be inviting men into the work. And what's good for the woman will also be good for the man. And that's why too, I mean, I was pretty confident with us going into it that I was like, if this is good for me, like I maybe felt a little selfish about it, but after a while I was like, this is not just good for me, this is good for him as well. Because him requiring to slow down and to connect with himself, he had to get over, you know, some fears, some shame, you know, the the ego being loud of like, you know, why are we doing it this way? Why can't we just go back to the old way? Da da da, you know, all these old stories and narratives and doubts coming up. That's beautiful. That's a good clearing. That's good when that's happening. So if you're also like at some point in the future going through this process, expect that that will happen. It's coming up to be cleared and to recommit and to recommit.
What we get out of this, it's like, ladies, gentlemen, like either of us can initiate to get started on the work, and it takes someone to initiate and do. And the case too is like with what you do a lot of work with your clients and with women, it's, you know, being okay with yourself that, hey, being detached from that outcome of if that man or if that woman says no, that there shall be another chance for you to share that with somebody else, and it will bring someone in alignment that is going to be that person in your life that you get to do so much with. And that's the beauty. And I love like what Lauren does for women, you know, helping them with the energetics, with the attraction, with, you know, feeling good with themselves. And this is what she does in her programs and all her coaching and in her content, which I believe is so amazing. It's helping women unlock that so then they can have the confidence to go and get whatever the heck they want in life. And that's the beauty and the inspiration and that I see in her eyes all the time. So
yeah.
But yeah, babe, anything else to add for the
on a final note, just on that too, it's like, how do you know if your partner, you know, is a partner to do this work with? And the only thing that I think is needed is open-mindedness and a growth-minded, you know, someone who's willing to grow and be curious. Of course, there might be, it's always 2 step forward, 1 step back. You know, it might be like, yeah, one day, and then another day might be like, I don't know if this is working. I mean, that's all of what we went through as well. And I was talking to a woman recently, and she was, you know, saying, you know, how do I know that this is, you know, the relationship, the man that I want to do this with? And I said, if he's open-minded and you guys, you know, are on the path of growth, that's all you need. That's all you need.
Also, education. What's the quote that you always say? Knowledge
precedes experience.
So what does that mean? It means get educated. Podcasts help a lot on the subject, as well as books. Because I wouldn't even be, you know, interacting on this if it wasn't for that. You know, even for example, simple like health stuff and ways of being and living in certain ways. The way I got onto certain biohacking stuff, it's because of certain knowledge. I asked my friends that are, you know, already going down this path, and what did they give me? They give me some resources, a podcast, couple people to follow, and then I start doing my own knowledge, and then I make my own decision by being like, okay, you know what, I'm going to do that, you know. So it takes one person to already start that, but then it takes the second person to encourage and ask and to share, and then also provide the knowledge. You don't need to hard sell them or push them or convince them. It's let the knowledge, let the info do the work for you. So
Yay. All right. Thanks for joining us for yet another episode on doing sex differently, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye. You can catch us on our socials. We started a TikTok page with like short clips, and obviously the YouTube, Spotify, etc. So yeah, be sure to follow us and support us. Let's go.